We all have that deeply relatable, just modern panic.
Oh, absolutely.
You're staring at your phone, right? You're nowhere near a wall outlet, and you just watch the battery icon tick down from like 2% to 1%.
It's the worst.
It is. It's terrifying, but in a very mundane way.
Yeah.
But try taking that exact same feeling of range anxiety and, scaling it up exponentially.
Right.
Like what happens when that battery isn't just running a little screen, but it's powering a 4,000-pound car flying down the highway? Or, to take it to the absolute extreme, what if it's powering a massive 80,000-pound commercial freight truck that's carrying a vital delivery across the country?
Yeah, the stakes just completely change at that scale. I mean, a dead smartphone just means you miss a group text.
Exactly.
But a dead commercial truck means the supply chain literally grinds to a halt. Shelves go empty, and logistics companies lose millions of dollars.
Yeah.
The physical reality of moving really heavy things with electricity is, well, it's arguably the most complex puzzle in modern engineering.
And solving that puzzle is exactly our mission today. We are cutting through all the glossy marketing and the whole EV revolution hype to figure out the actual messy logistical nuts and bolts of keeping an electrified world moving.
Right.
And to do this, we have a really fascinating stack of sources for you today. We're pulling from an internal AAA report from August 2023, detailing their real-world trials with mobile EV charging equipment.
Super interesting data in there.
Oh, it really is. We're also looking at a recent July 2026 press release from a mobile fleet charging startup called Be Charged EV. And finally, just to understand the macroeconomic reality of global freight, we're diving into a really dense, highly detailed academic study from UC Berkeley and Total Energies.
Yeah, that one is all about the future of electrifying heavy-duty trucks.
Right. So for you listening, this deep dive is going to fundamentally reframe how you look at every electric vehicle and delivery truck you pass on your commute. Okay, let's unpack this. Where's the best place to start understanding the friction of this transition?
I think the smartest place to start is just on the side of the road, looking at that AAA report. It gives us a great baseline of what happens when the system fails.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So back in 2022, battery electric vehicles made up roughly 0.68% of the vehicles on U.S. roadways.
Which is what, like maybe 2 million cars?
Yeah, about 1.9 million cars. But during that year, AAA responded to over 100,000 roadside events involving those electric vehicles.
Wait, 100,000? That sounds incredibly high for just a fraction of a percent of the cars on the road. I imagine like the vast majority of those were people just misjudging their battery range and getting stranded.
You would think so, but the data actually tells a completely different story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, out of those 100,000 calls, only 2.1% were because the car actually ran out of charge.
Only 2.1%.
Yep.
So the whole fear of running out of juice on the highway is just vastly overstated compared to, I don't know, getting a flat tire or locking your keys in the car.
Statistically speaking, yes. The anxiety totally outpaces the reality. However, the report highlights that when an EV does run out of charge, the logistical headache is immense.
How so?
Well, think about it. If a gas-powered car runs dry, a service truck pulls up, they pour a gallon of fuel into the tank, and the driver is back on the road in 5 minutes.
Right, easy.
But when an EV dies, you can't just hand the driver a bucket of electricity.
Ah.
Historically, an out-of-charge EV requires dispatching a heavy-duty flatbed tow truck to physically haul the vehicle to the nearest charging station.
Because you can't just tow an EV with its wheels on the ground, right?
Exactly. You risk severely damaging the electric motors if you do that.
Wow. So instead of a quick 5-minute fix, you're tying up a massive flatbed truck, making the stranded driver wait hours on the shoulder of a busy highway and costing the service provider an absolute fortune.
Right. And I assume this is exactly why AAA started experimenting with mobile charging units.
Yeah, that was the exact motivation. They wanted to see if they could just put a charger in the back of a standard service pickup truck to give stranded drivers just enough power to safely drive themselves to a real station.
Which sounds like a great idea on paper.
It does. But the internal report compares a Generation 1 unit they tested back in 2019 to a newer Generation 2 unit. And let's look at the hardware evolution there, because reading through the specs, it honestly felt like they went backward.
Yeah, they really did.
So the Gen 1 unit used a commercial-grade Blink IQ 200 charger that pushed out 50 amps. They powered it with a gas generator that had a 10.9-gallon tank.
Right, a pretty hefty setup.
Yeah, and it gave stranded drivers about 20 miles of range in 30 minutes. which is, enough to limp to the next exit.
Definitely.
But then for Gen 2, they downgraded to a residential-grade Blink HQ200 charger, maxing out at 32 amps, with a much smaller 6.1-gallon generator.
And how much range did that one give?
It only provided 16 miles of range in that same half hour. Why on earth would an organization like AAA choose to evolve their rescue tech to be, well, slower and less powerful?
I mean, it really comes down to the physical limitations of the service trucks themselves. A standard roadside assistance pickup is already packed to the brim with tools, jacks, air compressors, spare parts.
Right, they don't have infinite space.
Exactly. A commercial charger paired with a massive 10.9-gallon gas generator is incredibly bulky and heavy. It eats up payload capacity and precious bed space.
Ah,
So to deploy these across a national fleet, AAA likely had to compromise on power just to get a form factor that actually fit into a standard truck bed without displacing other essential equipment.
okay, that makes sense in theory.
Right.
But the report notes a glaring design flaw with that smaller Gen 2 unit.
Oh yeah, this part was wild.
Right. The way the charger was physically mounted actually blocked the standard 120-volt outlets on the generator.
Just a seemingly minor detail with massive operational consequences.
It literally turns a multi-tool into a single-use paperweight. If AAA responds to, like, a disaster relief situation or just needs to run heavy power tools at a crash site, they can't plug into their own generator because the EV charging component is just sitting right in the way.
It severely limits what that service truck can actually do.
It does. And also, I just have to pause and look at the optics of this whole setup.
Oh, the optics are terrible.
I can just picture the scenario. You're broken down on the side of the highway in a sleek, silent, zero-emissions electric car. The rescue truck pulls up, and the technician fires up a rattling 85-octane gasoline generator to pump juice into your battery.
Yeah.
I imagine the eco-conscious driver is just standing there watching in absolute horror. Isn't that entirely ironic? We are literally burning gas to rescue an electric car.
The irony is completely unavoidable, but it exposes the pragmatic reality of a technological transition,
Right.
We're currently relying on a bridge technology. In emergency roadside service, the absolute priority isn't carbon neutrality.
It's safety.
Exactly. It's clearing the highway quickly to prevent secondary accidents. Gasoline is incredibly energy dense, it's portable, and it's reliable. You use the tools of the old paradigm to support the fragile infrastructure of the new one.
That's a good point.
Plus, dispensing high-voltage electricity on the shoulder of a rainy highway is inherently dangerous.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about the rain.
Yeah, the report details how the technicians can't just plug the car in and hit a button. They actually have to connect a ground terminal on the charger to the generator's chassis and then run a separate ground lug from the generator to the service vehicle's body.
Wow.
The entire truck basically becomes the grounding rod.
So the margin for error is just razor thin,
Uh-huh.
and the logistics are highly specialized
Yeah.
just to rescue a single-stranded commuter.
Right.
Which immediately makes me wonder about scale, because dealing with one driver on the side of the road is an anomaly.
Sure.
But what happens when keeping EVs charged isn't an emergency, but the core of your entire business? Like, what if you are managing a massive commercial fleet of electric delivery vans?
Yeah, the logistics completely shift when you move from reactive rescue to proactive fleet management. And this is where the Be Charged EV press release provides a fascinating glimpse into the current market.
Okay, tell me about them.
So Anthony Okaribito founded this startup, and they just secured $7 million in funding. And nearly half of that $3.2 million is allocated specifically to expanding their charging equipment.
They are essentially taking that AAA concept of mobile charging and, like, industrializing it.
Exactly.
But instead of waiting for a van to die on the road, they are coming straight to the fleet hubs.
Right. They provide scheduled and on-demand mobile charging, offering both Level 2 and DC fast charging directly to where these commercial fleets are parked overnight or between shifts.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and they're currently operating in major hubs like Miami, Los Angeles, Boston, and San Francisco.
If you think about the real estate in cities like San Francisco or Boston, this model makes total sense.
It really does.
If you run a local delivery fleet, you probably just lease a crowded asphalt lot. You can't just tear up the concrete, upgrade the city's electrical grid, and install a massive permanent DC fast charging depot.
No, it would cost millions and take years of permitting.
Right.
Furthermore, maneuvering 50 delivery vans around a small lot just to take turns at a stationary charger. That requires paying employees just to play musical chairs with vehicles all night long.
Oh man, what a nightmare.
Yeah, so Be Charged EV solves the spatial and the labor problem. The vehicles stay parked, and the charging infrastructure navigates the lot to service them.
An elegant solution for, local last-mile delivery vans. But there was a specific line buried in that press release that really caught my eye and seemed completely out of place.
Oh, the battery swapping.
Yes. They mentioned that part of their long-term vision involves advancing battery swapping technology for commercial trucking. Now, battery swapping makes sense to me if we're talking about a tiny little electric moped. You just lift the battery out by a handle and pop a new one in. But how on earth do you swap a battery on a massive interstate semi-truck? The physics of that just sound impossible.
It sounds like science fiction, I know, but it is a very real, heavily researched alternative to plugging in. And it leads us directly into the deep waters of our final source, that academic paper from UC Berkeley and Total Energies.
Okay, let's get into it.
We really have to look at the heavy-duty dilemma here. The EPA is pushing a rule aimed at reducing heavy-duty vehicle greenhouse gas emissions by 29% by the year 2032.
Okay.
Electrifying these massive rigs is obviously the goal, but the fundamental enemy of that goal is gravity.
Yeah, let's lay out the strict constraints here, because this isn't just about building a bigger battery.
Not at all.
The U.S. Department of Transportation heavily regulates our highways, and they have a strict 82,000-pound total gross vehicle weight limit for electrified heavy-duty trucks. You cannot go over that number without destroying the asphalt. So in the freight business, every single pound of battery you add to the truck is a pound of profitable cargo you lose.
The trade-off is brutal. I mean, current battery technology averages around 147 watt-hours per kilogram. To move 82,000 pounds across the country, you need an exceptionally heavy battery.
So how did the researchers tackle this?
Well, they focused their analysis on long-haul routes in California, specifically trips over 300 miles, to compare the two competing visions for the future of freight,
Sure.
fast charging stations against battery swapping stations.
I want to dig into the fast charging station approach first, because their findings there seemed really counterintuitive to me.
Okay, yeah.
The researchers concluded that trucks relying on fast chargers actually require massive batteries, around 650 kilowatt hours. My initial thought was, well, why not just use a smaller, lighter battery to save weight for cargo and just pull over to charge more frequently?
It's a logical question, but the bottleneck isn't the technology. It's the human driver. Yeah, fast charging a heavy-duty truck still takes a considerable amount of time. And commercial truck drivers are heavily regulated by intrastate hours of service rules.
Right, the logbooks.
Exactly. In California, a driver has a strict 12-hour limit on their daily driving hours, which must be followed by a mandatory 10-hour rest period.
Okay.
If a logistics company forces a driver to stop 3 or 4 times a day just to sit idle at a charging station for an hour each time, that driver is burning through their legal working hours while sitting entirely still.
They won't even finish their route before the law forces them to pull over and sleep.
Exactly. So to protect the driver's clock, they have to equip the truck with a giant 650 kilowatt-hour battery, just minimizing the stops, even though that giant battery eats heavily into their cargo capacity and their profit margins.
So it's basically like eating one giant heavy meal in the morning so you don't have to stop working, whereas battery swapping is more like taking 5-minute espresso breaks all day long.
That is a very apt way to look at it. With a battery swapping station, an automated mechanism physically removes the depleted battery from the chassis and replaces it with a fully charged one.
Wow.
And the entire process takes between 5 to 10 minutes.
Which is essentially the exact same amount of time it currently takes a driver to pump a tank of diesel fuel.
Precisely. And because the refueling is so rapid, the truck doesn't need to hoard energy. The study found that swapping trucks operate most efficiently using much smaller batteries, usually in the range of 450 to 500 kilowatt hours.
And that reduction in battery weight translates directly back into payload capacity.
Yes. The swapping model offers less downtime for the driver and more revenue per trip.
But hold on, if I'm a logistics company and I'm building a swapping station that cycles through trucks every 10 minutes, I have to buy thousands of extra batteries just to sit on racks at the station, fully charged, waiting for a truck to arrive.
You do.
From a hardware perspective, that sounds astronomically expensive. You are buying the most expensive component of an EV, and it isn't even moving freight.
The researchers actually modeled that exact tension. When looking purely at hardware, fast charging wins easily on what they term battery utilization efficiency.
Which means what?
They measure this in ton miles per kilowatt hour. So in a fast charging ecosystem, every single battery you own is actively working inside a truck. There's no idle capital just sitting on a shelf.
Okay, so if the capital cost of spare batteries is so astronomically high, why does the math in this study ultimately favor battery swapping?
Because human labor is more expensive than idle hardware.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the swapping model wins on transportation efficiency, measured in ton miles per hour. The researchers point out that the average driver wage in California is $28.02 an hour.
Okay.
When you calculate the compounding cost of paying hundreds of drivers $28 an hour just to sit in the cab of a truck and wait for a battery to fast charge, it completely eclipses the capital cost of the spare batteries.
That is wild.
The sheer speed of the swap makes it the economic winner today.
It is wild to think that the hourly wage of human labor is actually the primary force shaping the physical hardware requirements of our national EV infrastructure.
It really is.
But still, looking at the big picture, relying on thousands of expensive, heavy-duty batteries just sitting idle at a truck stop, I mean, it still feels like a massive waste of resources.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, stealing my catchphrase. I love it. Okay, let's unpack this. What are those idle batteries actually doing while they just wait around?
They are actually functioning as the secret weapon of the entire swapping ecosystem because they completely decouple the truck from the power grid.
Decouple it how?
Consider the fast charging model. A massive truck rolls in, plugs in, and demands a monumental surge of energy immediately. The local utility has to provide that power right then and there, regardless of whether electricity is currently cheap or expensive, clean or dirty. In many cases, a sudden spike in fast charging demand forces the grid operator to literally fire up a natural gas or coal peaker plant just to meet that instantaneous load.
Oh, I see the difference. If the battery is just sitting on a rack inside the swapping station, there is no immediate urgency. The truck is already gone.
Exactly. The swapping station can utilize a carbon-aware charging strategy. They can charge those spare batteries slowly overnight or maybe during the middle of the day when solar panels are flooding the grid with cheap green energy.
That makes so much sense.
The researchers modeled this and found that by merely shifting the timing of the charge, a 20% to 96% compared to a fast charging station.
Wait, a 96% reduction in emissions just by strategically timing the charge?
Yep.
That is a monumental drop. But surely, managing that complex charging schedule cuts into the station's bottom line, right?
Barely. The study found that operating with this carbon-aware strategy only reduced the station's overall profits by an average of 4.3%.
Wow.
It is literally one of the most cost-effective methods for slashing carbon emissions in the entire logistics sector.
But wait, if they have that much stored energy and control over when they pull from the grid, they aren't just consumers anymore, are they? Can't they act like grid batteries themselves?
They absolutely can, and they do, through what are called ancillary services. The swapping station can actually actively sell services back to the power grid.
How does that work?
Well, the researchers examined the California energy market to prove this. Think about the grid in the dead of winter.
Okay.
Air conditioning usage drops off entirely. But perhaps there are strong winter winds spinning the turbines or baseline nuclear plants that can't easily spin down. The grid suddenly has too much power being generated.
And since the grid always has to be perfectly balanced, too much power is just as dangerous as too little. I mean, it can literally blow out transformers.
Right. So the grid operator will actually pay large consumers to absorb that excess energy to keep the system balanced. It's a service known as regulation down.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, those idle batteries at the swapping station can instantly soak up that excess winter power. By selling the service back to the grid, the study found that swapping stations boosted their profit margins by up to 16.9% in December.
Okay, my mind is genuinely blown by the scale of this. If you extrapolate this across the country, these aren't just truck stops where drivers buy bad coffee anymore.
No, not at all.
If you have thousands of heavy-duty batteries sitting at stations along major interstates, they act as massive decentralized power plants. They become active, stabilizing pillars of the national energy market.
Exactly.
But let me throw one final curveball at this theory.
Bring it on.
We established that battery swapping is currently the economic winner, primarily because of the high cost of a truck driver's labor, that $28 an hour.
Right.
What happens to this entire infrastructure model when autonomous self-driving trucks finally arrive? If the driver's labor cost drops to absolute zero, does fast charging suddenly win the race?
You've zeroed in on the exact trend the researchers highlight at the end of their study.
Really?
Yes, the math flips entirely. If you remove the human driver from the cab, the cost of time plummets. It no longer matters if a self-driving truck sits at a fast charger for 2 hours because you aren't paying it an hourly wage.
Wow.
In that scenario, slower fast charging with giant 650 kilowatt-hour batteries likely wins out because the logistics company can completely avoid the massive capital expense of buying all those extra swapping batteries.
That is fascinating. The physical future of our highway infrastructure is literally a race between the cost curve of battery chemistry and the development of autonomous driving software.
It really is.
Well, let's wrap this up because this has been quite a journey today. We started on the rainy shoulder of a highway with a gas-powered generator rescuing a stranded EV, really digging into the messy, constrained bridge technologies that are keeping early adopters moving.
Yeah, and from there we scaled up to commercial fleets, looking at how companies like B-Charged EV are just bypassing stationary chargers entirely to bring power directly to delivery vans in crowded urban lots.
And finally, we explored the massive logistical chess game of heavy-duty freight. We saw how the strict physical limits of highway weight and the biological limits of a driver's daily clock are forcing the industry to choose between massive batteries with fast chargers or smaller batteries with lightning-fast swapping stations.
Stations that double as green energy grid stabilizers.
Exactly.
The biggest takeaway for you listening should be that the transition to electric vehicles is not a simple one-to-one swap. It isn't just about unbolting a gas engine and dropping in a lithium-ion battery. It requires a complete redesign of labor economics, of global supply chains, and fundamentally of how we physically interact with the electrical grid.
It really does. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder on your own. As electric vehicle battery prices continue to plummet year after year, what if the future of our national energy security isn't about building massive, centralized, multi-billion-dollar power plants? What if, instead, the grid of the future relies on a hidden, decentralized web of millions of spare batteries sitting quietly at truck stops and mobile fleet hubs all across the country, absorbing and releasing power while we sleep? The next time your phone hits 1% and you feel that familiar range anxiety, don't just look for an outlet. Think about how that tiny battery in your hand operates on the exact same principles as the living, breathing network that is about to change the world.